Regular City Council meeting for Monday, January 23rd. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have our Boy Scouts here this evening. I would love it if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
I gotta sit right over there. Two by two? All right, that's fine. All right, ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Boy Scouts. I appreciate it. Holly, will you call the roll, please?
Lanyon. Pratt.
Here.
Jenkins. Here. Van Alster.
Here.
Rhines.
Here.
Gilroy.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
All right, I am looking for approval as the agenda as presented, unless there are changes that need to be made.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you so much for your support. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have an opportunity for audience participation with a maximum of 5 minutes per presentation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? All right. Moving along, we have our council meeting minutes of January 9th, 2023. I'm looking for a motion to approve unless there were changes that need to be noted. I do believe there was a spelling for Steve's last name. We caught that? Okay, all right, thank you so much. All right, excellent. Hadn't quite gotten down to that point yet, but thank you so much. Excellent. It's the beauty of technology. All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve those meeting minutes as presented.
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you so much. Do I have support?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Motion, opposed? Motion carries. And Brandon, you had an opportunity to review accounts payable.
I did. So it was a little larger just because we paid a lot of our annual dues that we do throughout the year, but nothing that was out of the ordinary or out of the question. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve checks 76358 through 76401, ACH 354 through 363, and EFT 364 for a total of $394,775.47.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Brandon regarding the accounts payable at this time? Do I have support for Brandon's motion?
Support.
Thank you so much. Holly, will you call the roll for accounts payable, please?
Jenkins.
Yes.
Van Alster.
Yes.
Rhines.
Yes.
Gilroy.
Yes.
Lanyon.
Yes.
Pratt.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Moving on to our action items. Our first action item is our school resource officer service agreement. We do have the agreement here in front of us in our packet. I'll go ahead and turn this right over to our city manager, John Hampton.
Thank you, Mayor Gilroy, members of council. Excuse me. So what we do have an updated service agreement for school resource officer with Williamston schools. They were able to secure a grant, and so they were actually able to increase the amount that we're paying to our SROs, which is adequate, but certainly with the grant, we're able to pay them more. And there's also an additional, the service hours is up to 30 in this contract. So the form of contract is the same one that we approved last time around. I think it was in the summer. So happy to answer any questions you may have, but again, we're honored and up to the task of providing that service to the school. I think it's very important. I think it's also good from not only from a safety standpoint, but from a community policing aspect.
And John and I spoke about this Friday when we met, and just to clarify, our school resource officers, that service is provided by our current reserve officers.
That's
We
correct.
have 2 that are sworn in as school resource officers. So it does not pull a daytime or afternoon patrol officer out of their duty hours in order to go over to the school, unless there would be a situation where that need would be required. So that is one good thing, that this is service provided by our reserve officers. Yes, Dan.
So seeing as a lot of this is, monies is provided by the new grant the school got, will this have to, and I saw it's a substantial grant and we shouldn't have to worry about it for a while, but when that grant, when we've used up those grant monies, will we have to adjust this at that time again, or?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, thank you, that's a great question, Councilmember Ryan. So, I believe the grant is for a 5-year period, and so, if you know, a lot of the media, there's a number of communities in and around our area in Michigan that receive the same grant. So, at that time where if the grant funds were exhausted and there wasn't another program, then the school would have to make a policy decision to continue to fund that. Typically with public safety grants, that's part of their grant agreement with the granting agency, is that in order to receive those federal dollars, I think in this case it's federal to state to the school, that's part of the commitment. There were a lot of fire safety grants in the late 90s, early 2000s, were the same thing, where if you hired someone, you got grants for 3 to 5 years, and you'd have to keep the folks on for an equal number of times. It was a great question.
Yeah, great question. And I'm certain that as we come to the end of this grant, this 5 years, if there's an opportunity, if they decide that they're going to ask for people, you know, are you interested in applying, they're going to renew the funds or something like that, or before that grant ends, we'll be looking for other resources and having those meetings with the school district. Great. Any other questions? Yes,
So
Terry?
you're at the beginning of a 5-year grant, you think?
That is
Yes.
correct. Yeah, February 1st.
Great. And Tim, you had an opportunity to go through this contract, nothing,
It looked familiar,
Yeah.
but it starts February 1st, and it does not have any ending date. It continues until either party terminates, and it can be terminated on 30 days' notice. But if it's grant funded from the schools, we just presume it's going to continue. The employees remain under the control of the city, so if the police chief requires their services, they have to go.
okay, excellent, thank you so much. Any other questions regarding this action? All right, I'm looking for that action.
Make the motion to approve the school resource officer services agreement as presented.
Thank you so much, do I have support?
Support.
Any further discussion? Holly, will you call the roll, please?
Van Osberg,
Yes.
Rhines,
Yes.
Gilroy,
Yes.
Lanyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Excellent, thank you so much. And I think we're very fortunate that we do have a reserve program here in Williamston, that we are able to use them as our resources. The next agenda item, our action item, is our interim police chief. We have a memo in our packet from our city manager, John Hannafin, and that is a recommendation. I'll turn that over to John, and I think we have our candidate here in the audience.
You do.
Thank you, members of council, Mayor Gilroy. We were all sad and but equally excited for Chief Wolf to, I guess, re-enter retirement, but got left us with the task of filling the police chief position. So what I'm recommending is that the city of Williamston contract with Robert, everybody knows him as Bob, I think his given parental name is Robert, so we'll call him that, for 6 months with the possibility of an additional 6 months after that. The proposed agreement is attached. It's very similar to the agreement with with Bob's original agreement and then with Chief Wolf. Obviously, he has more than a decade of experience here in Williamston. He's up to the task of guiding us through this transition period. I do want to report, I mean, we're down to 5 full-time officers with a very, very likelihood that another officer is going to be seeking employment at another agency. So we're in a transition time in the department, and I think there's no other person to help us guide us through that than Chief Young. When we do get to the police chief search, I've already talked to Bob about being part of the search committee for that. But I've also talked to Dr. Spina, and he actually volunteered his services. So we will go through an open and transparent process for appointing the permanent chief, but for this period, I think it's critical that we get Chief Young on board and get things stabilized a little bit, and then move forward.
And again, John and I, we talked about this over the past couple weeks in our meetings, and this is a good time for us to pause. We know that Chief Wolf took the department forward. We sang his praises last council meeting, which was his last council meeting with us, and he took the department to the next level, and that's the expectation that we had of that next chief coming in after Bob. This is going to be like autopilot for Bob to come in. He is so familiar with it. He has the respect of the officers that are there. There's new officers that Bob will get to know while he's taking on this role for us. I don't have any apprehension in doing this. I think this is right to take this pause, have Bob lead us through this next 6 months, like John said, and really determine where are we going. Bob will be able to, you know, hit the ground running, and in that respect, look to bring our roster back up to at capacity. And it is unfortunate that we are, you know, losing some officers, but I have confidence in Bob that he will be able to seek out new officers that want to come to Williamston and serve our community. With that being said, do I have questions regarding, yes,
I
Scott?
have a comment. It's an honor to vote for Bob Dunn twice.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that.
Excellent. Any other questions regarding the contract or what we've been discussing? Yes.
So no, obviously very well qualified, no problem about that. What's our plan though, moving forward? I mean, we have 6 months here. What's your timeline on how long you think it's gonna take? What are our steps we're taking to?
Yes, absolutely, John.
Sure,
Thank you.
so thank you. So first thing, excuse me, first things first, I mean, we do have, you know, the very strong likelihood we're gonna have four full-time sworn
Mhm.
officers. And so in my discussions with, you know, former and hopefully soon to be current Chief Young, how can he use his experience and connections to help steer some folks here in this very interim short period to get us back up to full staffing? As far as the timeline, I think that we need to have that deeper discussion at our visioning session in March. And I've had this discussion with Mayor Gilroy about, you know, Chief Wolf was the right choice at the time, but for whatever reason, that process, and there, you know, there's no animosity on either side. He did a great job, we all loved him, he was fantastic, but that didn't work for whatever reason. So how do we avoid that moving forward? So I would say timeline, towards the end of the 6 months, that we would have a pretty good idea of who we were gonna select. But I left that open because candidates come open at different times, and this is not the greatest time right now to be looking for a police chief, you know, coming off the holidays. There's 3 or 4 police chief jobs open right now that I think are pretty good. But going through the resumes last time, we'll get a great candidate. People want to be here. They want to work here in Williamston. I mean, it's the community, but it's also, I'll say it, the support that this council has for law enforcement. And frankly, it's one of the reasons that I'm here as your city manager is knowing that we support law enforcement. So I know that we'll be able to get a great candidate, but we have to figure out a number of things with the department, not just the staffing at a base level, but supervision moving forward. And frankly, I think that we need to figure that out as a council and administration, you know, and through the interim chief. And it's probably, we're almost fortuitous it went this way, because he has that knowledge of having been on board for 10 years, and he's seen the ebb and flow, and he was the chief during, you know, kind of the lean economic years. So kind of recap all that and, you know, make that paragraph into a sentence. Towards the end of the 6 months, that we would have a really good idea of, and by that we've already gone through a selection process and we selected someone, and then, you know, perhaps we're waiting for their endpoint at their job to come work for us.
Excellent.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
as a comment, I would just like to say, I mean, I would like to have a frank session at our visioning session or whatever it ends up being about the department and what we can do to entice people to stay longer and to be around longer, and because we have been having a lot of turnover, so I would like to discuss whether that needs to be whatever.
Turnover of officers?
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'd like to just have a frank discussion about what that means to
Yeah.
fix that problem.
Yep. I 100% agree with Brandon. We've got good things in place. We need to figure out what can we do better, what makes this more attractive, what does the role of chief look like, you know, so that when we do solicit for resumes, that you know, they have a very good picture of what the job would entail, what it would look like. Dan, you had a question?
It was more of a comment on the timeline that John just before. I honestly, I like that timeline with the opening being posted towards the end of the 6 months, because honestly, that gives it, assuming that we vote for Bob to be interim here in a few minutes, that gives him an opportunity. He knows what a good officer for Williamston looks like, and the department's going through a transition period. That gives, he has a very good head for hiring. He's proven that previously, rather than trying to rush anything, bring in a new chief, and then they have to hire possibly 3 new officers right away. Honestly, I'd rather he be doing that.
Thank you. Yes, Terry?
Just a quick comment. Chief Young, I'm the new guy here,
Yes.
and I have never met you, and I'm just curious, how many years were you the chief?
So I was chief here just short of 11 years. My police background, I was a city officer in Tecumseh for a year. I was with the state police for 33 years. That's where I met Jimmy Wook. Jimmy worked for me for a while. And then I've been retired almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years
And
to
so,
the day.
I love this city. I love the police department. Had a hand in building that with Scott. And so I didn't think I'd be back. I didn't think I'd be back this soon, but I am excited about the opportunity, and I like everything I'm hearing and the direction it's going. Because it's nice to be in this position. Because I didn't know the city manager. I could just say, you know what, I just don't think this is for me. I love the conversations I was having, and I know not all the council members, but I know a lot of you, and so I'm glad to be here. Did I answer your question?
You did, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think everything works out for a reason and a purpose. I think the timing of this, I think Bob's willingness. So I hope that we can move this forward. So if there's no other comments, questions, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint Robert Bob Young as interim police chief for a 6-month period beginning on January 27th, 2023.
Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate that. If there's no further discussion, Holly, will you call the roll?
Rhines,
Yes.
Gilroy,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Lanyon,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Van Osper,
Yes.
Holly, when can we get him sworn in?
tonight.
Thank you. Right, talk to Holly, so I'm going to stick around.
All right, excellent. Fantastic. Thanks, Chief. I appreciate it, and I'm so happy. All right, our last action item of the evening is our HUD water main projects NEPA clearing process and to set our public hearing. I'm gonna turn this over, let me see, who's our memo? Is it you, John, or is it Scott?
It's me.
Scott, all right, well, that's why you're here.
All right.
All right,
All right, well, as everybody recalls, we've gotten blessed with money from the federal government to put in water mains in town, and the money's been channeled through HUD. And part of HUD's requirements is if we're dealing with, we've got some water mains that have to cross the river. And they have some environmental review requirements. Part of that is we have to do a hearing, a public hearing. So we're asking you tonight to set the public hearing for the next council meeting. That will be done with enough advance warning to meet how many calendar days we have to have it advertised and so forth.
excellent.
Any questions? I'll give us a very short presentation at that meeting of the stuff that we have to hit for the public notice.
Excellent, thank you. So for clarification, Scott will come back and he'll give that information during the information session. This is just to set the date for that public hearing. So if there are no questions, I will go ahead and ask for that motion.
Make a motion to set a public hearing for the NEPA clearing process for the water main crossing of Red Cedar River for February 13th, 2023 at 7:01 p.m.
Thank you, Terry. Do I have
Second.
support? Thank you. Steve, if there's no further discussion, Holly, will you call the roll?
Gilroy,
Yes.
Lanyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Van Osper,
Yes.
Rhines.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. That concludes our action items for this evening. We're moving right into our discussion items, and we're going to go ahead, change gears, and go into our wastewater treatment plant work session. And Scott, I see you've got a presentation for us, so I'm gonna just turn this right over to you.
Sure. Actually, yeah, if you'd hit the lights there. So I have to apologize, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. The actual PowerPoint itself isn't communicating, but we're gonna use the PDF that was in your packet, so.
Excellent.
So we've been talking about needs at the wastewater treatment plant for some time, and what are our objectives tonight when I explain what the issues are, how we're gonna address them, what happens if we choose to do nothing, that's always a choice, and then how many REUs can we get out of the system currently, and what would we be able to do for development, and then what we get for your money, and some future planning things that the studies that we've had done have revealed. Okay. The clarity of this isn't so good because it's not coming from the PowerPoint. But a couple things just to remember is the wastewater environment, everything is trying to eat things up all the time. So Councilman Hanson came over and did a visit with us at the wastewater treatment plant, and that was one thing that we really talked about is everything in wastewater is trying to eat up everything all the time. So your concrete's constantly deteriorating and so forth. It's a heavy, intensive area for electricity. We use heat, so there's a lot of energy costs that go along with that, and then a lot of maintenance costs because you have pumps and mechanical things moving all the time. So that stuff breaks and degrades, and we need to address that and keep our assets in good shape. Why is the wastewater treatment plant located where it is? Well, the original area of town is here, okay? And we use gravity sewers. Well, gravity goes downhill, and so all the sewer pipes go towards the downstream section of the river. That's why the wastewater treatment plant was the site, where the site was originally. And you just can't pick that thing up and move it someplace else that's more convenient. So what does that mean? Well, that means that our wastewater treatment plant site is right here, and we have the Red Cedar River that kind of goes around like this. So we're surrounded on 3 sides by the river. And when the river comes up in the flood stage, this is where the floodwaters are. So there's not a lot of space for us to expand and do things in these areas. There's a little bit of space around the fringes here, plus there's a little bit of stuff on the inside, and you'll see that as we talk further. So the wastewater treatment plant, in the early days, you can't see this here, but prior to 1946, the pipes went right to the river. So the sanitary sewage just went, and back then the solution to pollution was dilution. You just diluted it in the river. Doesn't make for a very good river, right? So in the 1946 to the early 50s, the original plant was built. That's kind of this blue area here. So the sewers that were being put in town, because there was a lot of upgrades in the World War II time period. There were sewers before that, but the major infrastructure that we have now, a lot of that backbone was put in during that time. Came across the river, came to here, and then some of it came down Sunset Street, and it all came to this location. And they did primary settling at that time, and they added some chlorine, disinfected it, and then sent it back out. So you get some of the heavy stuff out, get some of the floaties out, you disinfect it, and still send it out. So it wasn't quite as good as what you do nowadays with at least secondary treatment. And in 1970, the city initiated a project to bring it up to the more modern standards of secondary treatment. So you're doing biological treatment at this point. So the green area of the plant was added then. They repurposed some other areas that are hatched here. Let's move on. So more recent history, and this looks a lot more like what the plant that you see right now. In 1988, all this purpley kind of stuff in here was added, all right? So they expanded the process and added sludge storage facilities so that we could hold half a year's worth of sludge. That's the solids that you get as a byproduct of the whole biological process. It normally is land applied on farm fields, and it's sort of a way of recycling, right, in a green type of way. Use it for fertilizer. And then more in 2010 and 2011, we had our last major project at the plant where we had to redo the crossing of the Red Cedar River, redid the headworks, repurpose some stuff. We did fix a number of things throughout the plant that don't really show up here because they're all internal things, replace pumps and do things like that. So every time you do a major project, you kind of go back through the older parts of the plant, evaluate what's there, what the needs are, and fix it, because you need to have more life out of all that. That was a $3.6 million project 12 years ago. So when we crossed the river, the existing pipe was about ready to break, and if we lost that pipe, it would have been a really bad day in Williamston because we would be taking the river in an emergency situation. So we lowered things, put a larger pipe in for the future because someday the line across the golf course could be enhanced if it's ever needed, and then the headworks were taken care of. So we call it the crossing of the Red Cedar, or the parting of the Red Cedar. It was kind of cool because they crossed half at a time, got that pipe across. Let's move forward, I won't spend a lot of time there. We're going to take you on a quick little tour of the plant and what the existing needs are right now. So the work that was done in the headworks in 20, this should say 2011, the PowerPoint fixed that. We put in the new lift station, we left some space for additional pump, we redid the screenings and then the grit chambers. But we still have some needs in that area because some of the controls are in an antiquated building from the 1946 time period. On to the primary settling tanks. This is like textbook out of my MSU wastewater class. This is actually out of my textbook right here, but our design is exactly what was in that textbook. They have sprockets, they move these things. So there's moving pieces and parts. We've taken these things down through the years and fixed pieces and parts as we can. But every now and then, you gotta invest a little bit more. Currently, we're having some issues because we are bringing what's called, well, I won't get into technical terms, but some parts of the wastewater flow come back to this and we're utilizing some of the capacity. We've got some concrete repairs, we've got some sludge pumps that don't have a way to work individually, so there's some inefficiencies and some problems that we need to fix. And we have the need potentially for one more tank to meet demands that we see during high flows. The extended aeration project, or part of the plant, sorry, is where the biological activity happens. That the previous slide is where we let the heavier stuff settle down. It's like a quiet chamber and things settle in the water. If you ever take something, shake it up in water and set it there, you'll notice that the clear starts at the top and then it settles down, right? That's happening in that previous chamber. In this chamber, we're taking the organics that are left, we're enhancing the biological activity, and we're using that to treat the organics that are in there. So this part of the process is in pretty decent shape. We do have some concrete repairs. We do have a lot of energy used in these blowers. They blow air into the water, and they churn this around, and that's what keeps the biological activity going. So there's potentially some efficiencies to gain for savings in electricity, which that's one of our biggest costs in the plant right now. There's, again, some obsolete electrical controls. It's the big bank of, like you'd see a whole wall of all these panels with electrical stuff. Some of that stuff dates back to some pretty early versions of the plant. So we've got to evaluate that and see if some of those things need to be fixed before they fail. And we have no heat in the lower part of the building that these blowers are in. We're getting by right now, but we really should fix that. So the secondary clarifiers, this is where we run into some problems. We have some limitations right now during high flows. We have 2 clarifiers, and what happens is from that other tank we're churning up all that material. We send it through a pipe, it comes up through the bottom of this, and then it comes out into the tank. It's supposed to have a blanket on the bottom that keeps all that stuff down there, and then that clear water overflows a weir, which is right around this edge right here, and then it runs out eventually to be discharged to the river. This is taking the biological part of it out, and the treated water is being able to go out, right? So under some of the high flows that we see with the I&I that we have in our system, the sludge blanket doesn't stay down here where it's supposed to. It kind of pushes up through the sides, and then we're getting short circuiting, and it's wanting to discharge out. So we need to stop that. We've got, some concrete repairs, some other things like that to do. There's a trough protection that we could put over top of this for the algae, and there is also a baffle system that we could install on these 2 existing ones to keep that from curling over and bring it back down. That can give us a little bit more capacity on them without as much construction dollar. And then we do believe pretty firmly that we need to have a 3rd clarifier to make sure that we can take care of the high flow events. Recommendations are for a 4th one potentially, but we're not pushing that right now. We don't think that's the right call right now. The UV disinfection from those clarifiers, it comes through a pipe, goes through here. There's these tubes that are UV lights, and that's that final disinfection that happens before we discharge. The equipment that we have in the plant is from 1988, and the manufacturer of the parts that drive these UVs is no longer in existence. The UV tubes themselves We've been getting them, I think it's coming from Mexico right now, and they're handmade. And we don't know how much longer we're gonna be able to get those things because they're out of normal production. And they're like doing them in special batches for us. So we kind of buy up whatever we can get when we can get it. It is time, we've got to replace this before we're in a urgent situation. Whenever you replace a system like this, you make sure that you have it sized for what you would have potentially in the future. It doesn't cost that much more to have a size for a little bit larger, so that's why you spend that money when you do it. There's 2 pumps in that chamber, and when the river is up high, the flood level of the river would actually be way up here. And if that happens, this process doesn't work. The water doesn't flow through here and flow out that way. So on the other side of this wall is a way that water can flow one way, but it can't flow back in. It's a check valve, okay? So that'll keep the river from flowing in, but you still gotta get the water out that you're treating. So we have currently 2 pumps down here, but these 2 pumps are not quite big enough to handle the highest flows. So what's the solution? You drop a 3rd pump in, you're all set.
So what happens now in high flows?
We're limited to what one of these pumps can, right now, well, actually, we're okay. I mean, okay, there's 2 pumps, we can handle it. But we have to meet state requirements, which are you have to have your size on one of your largest out of service. So, and that does happen. One of these pumps can quit, and then we're not okay. So by adding the 3rd, you can always have one out because it's broken and for service, whatever, and you can still meet the demands.
What happens when we're not okay?
We would get a discharge violation.
We don't ever wanna be not okay.
I believe it, I'm just wondering, physically, so there's a monetary penalty and we were leasing sewage, or there's secondary stuff,
There
right?
can be a monetary penalty. You can also be given what's called a consent order. And then basically the state says, you have to do this, they'll fine you, and we're forced into doing a project at that point.
We'd rather do the project on our own
I'm sure we
without
don't-
being forced to.
These pumps fail regularly, need maintenance regularly.
We keep them maintained, but they're from 1988, so.
They're reaching their life expectancy.
Yeah, and that's part of my message tonight,
Yeah.
is the city has been doing a very good job of
Yes.
maintaining the assets. And it, you know, if you remember back through those projects that we talked about, the history of the plants, the city goes, you know, does a project, we live the useful life of that stuff. It's time to look at a project and go, okay, what stuff from the previous projects do we have to fix or replace or upgrade? And then what other stuff do we need to make sure that we're in good shape now, okay? So at the digester building, that's kind of a side process because the biological material, when it's all dead, we have to digest it the rest of the way and then make it safe to land apply. That's this process. We did do some repairs in the project 12 years ago. We replaced the floating roof on this, did some internal things. There's pumps down in this basement level here, and then redid some internal coatings. We did not at that time have the money in the project to do the exterior, so that is one thing that even at that time, we knew it was gonna need to be done, but it was safe to wait till the next project. That's why it's up on the docket now. There's a sludge pump that did not get addressed. That's for, they use it to assist in pumping to the tankers that come out here. And right now we're having to use surface pumps and add it to the system. And it would be better if we can afford it to put in pumps that are based right at the unit itself. Again, some controls and electrical stuff that's time for it to be looked at. So the administration building, there's parts of the building are from 88, parts of the building are from 46. So there's some things that, you know, have needs, there's some doors that need to be replaced, you know. A commercial door can cost $10,000 to replace. It's ridiculous how costly it is, but it's a door that has to be installed into a concrete wall, so there's a lot that goes with that. You know, there's stucco repairs on part of the building. There's handrails and stuff throughout some of the tanks. It's time for some of these things. I had some the PowerPoint, I had added a couple more photos just to show you, oh, here's the concrete falling off this one corner, you know, but you get it. The sanitary system, you know, we've talked about the high flows, what's going on. We've got the Red Cedar River in here, and this is our sewer network. Well, there's a fair amount of the sewer that's underneath this, and we do everything we can to eliminate that stuff, but this is Mechanic Street, and this is Dahlstrom Park, and there's one of our sewer lift stations right there during a flooding event that happens almost every year.
So about 3 years ago when we had problems with the lift station down there?
This is from that particular event, yeah, and the water had gotten up high enough that it actually went into the dry side where all the electronics were.
Yep, and then we had to raise all that.
Yep.
Yep.
So we have a project right now that's not completed yet, but it's getting ready for bid right now. That'll take that another step and get a platform around this, and we are looking at the top of the wet well, if we should raise that a little bit. We can't get it out of the 100-year floodplain, but we can get it up out of some of those normal spring floods maybe. But that's not gonna stop the intersection where there's manholes over here. So, and then, you know, that other picture that was in the corner, this was from one of our road projects. We found a storm sewer that was broken right next to a sanitary manhole, and the manhole was made out of red bricks, and the water was just flowing right through the side. You didn't know it just if you were to pop the manhole lid and you look down in there. But once we saw it on the outside, boom, we found one of our smoking guns of where some of the cyanide came from. So we're doing everything we can to try and find this stuff, and we're incrementally, you know, taking a little bit out each time when we do that, but we still have a long way to go, and this takes, you're never gonna get it all out. You just can't. So, you know, this is the river and the wastewater treatment plant, so every time the river goes way up, the wastewater treatment plant goes way up. That average use of the day, you know, we talk about certain parts of the plant being based on average day. Well, that doesn't mean that the whole day goes at the same flow rate. At night, the flow goes down. In the morning, at breakfast time, the flow goes up. And at dinner time, the flow goes up, but that's just the average. So, you know, normally our plant can handle that kind of stuff really easy. But when you start throwing on this I&I on top of it, the flows go way, way up. So we had Tetra Tech work with us on a very bare bones report of our status on the plant. I think you guys have, we've shared that with you. You've had a chance to digest that a little bit. And we only want to focus on the most critical aspects of the plant. And the good news is our aeration system actually, based on the type of, since we've gotten Old Nation, you know, the brewery process out of what we're doing, it's actually given us a little bit more capability to handle higher flows on the biological aspect of the plant. And that was also killing us at the digesters because they were using up all of our capacity at the digesters and we couldn't hold. We were making so much of the sludge. So we're in good shape there. That part of the plant is based on that average loading. It's not based on heavier max day loads type of thing because the biological process takes days to go through, okay? The other aspects of the plant are really susceptible to the high flows. The primary clarifiers are one of our weak points, the pinch point, and the secondary clarifiers is another pinch point for us. We take care of those things, and all of a sudden, we've eliminated our urgencies that we get with the high flow time periods. And we gain just a little bit more RUs potentially out of it, so it just takes some of that pressure off. You don't have to worry about, yes, we can afford to let this development in, or this piece of land develop down by the highway type of thing. So we can't read it here, but we're only we had 4 alternates that they took a look at. 2 of the alternates were no-goes right off the beginning because it was actually pretty cost effective to do a whole complete different type of treatment process, but in the meantime, you gotta build an entire brand new treatment plant, which that doesn't make any sense. So we're gonna stick with the kind of treatment plant that we have right now. So 2 of the alternates were eliminated from there because we're not gonna spend $19 million or $20 million to replace whole plants. That left us with 2 main considerations. One of them was to do some fixing of some of the weak points in the system. The other one was looking at maybe an equalization basin. The problem with the equalization basin is we were gonna spend over $5 million just on the equalization basin and still have some of those other weak points in the system as far as how much flow you could get through it. So we focused more in on alternate A. We don't have to do everything in alternate A. We really looked at, you know, just what does the city really need right now, and that's the primary clarification. We've got to fix stuff that's broken inside the plant or stuff that is going to break pretty soon inside the plant, so that we keep our process working well. And then if we can get into the primary clarifier, that would be helpful too. And then there's a few pumps and that type of thing that we may or may not put in as we get to the final numbers on things. We anticipate that we would be able to do a project in the $6 to $7 million range, but that is going to take a little bit more getting into the details. This study that we did was very cursory, just take a look at things. Now you got to get in, you really got to look at that bank of electronics that are on the wall and get that priced out accurately, that type of thing. We have to refine with the construction market. That's why it's a really crazy thing right now with what the construction market's been doing. So we're trying to be reasonably conservative and shoot low but estimate high, and we won't really know that for sure until we get into it. We did have them take a look at the solids handling, which is the digesters. There's some alternatives that we can do in the future, but at this point, there's some unknowns that just, it doesn't make any sense to move forward. You know, the whole PFAS thing, Eagle could decide that you can't land a fly anymore because of PFAS. Or they could decide that the other alternate of taking it to a landfill, they can't do that. So until some of this kind of settles in, it makes no sense to really spend a lot of money. We're currently okay now that we've gotten the brewery process off, and we've bought a significant amount of time. You know, we're not anticipating huge growth and that type of thing, but adequate growth so that the city's healthy and the funds are healthy coming into the city. And this can be reviewed because we know what the alternates are, and then how we can move forward. So when we look at the plant site itself, you know, some of that work is right inside the interior of the plant. You know, those clarifiers, that baffle work's going to happen right inside of them. If we add a third clarifier, it would fit in there and still just barely squeak inside here with the floodplain issue. The fourth one gets troublesome if they ever need that in the future, but that might have to go in a different area. The solids handling issues, again, that would have to go probably to the south of the plant in this direction, but that's not an urgent thing at the moment. But
Do we anticipate having to buy any property?
That's funny that you should ask that, Terry.
I'm the new guy,
I know.
I'm the Barefoot Pilgrim, so that's my
Yep.
job.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and
at some point, it's highly likely.
yes.
Okay.
Steve, you had, I think your
Just
hand up.
back on the alternative where you color-coded
The
various
red,
projects.
green, and
Oh, yeah.
the red is the most important and critical.
The red was like, you just, yeah, okay. That one.
Yeah.
Okay, so in here, we've highlighted the work with the final clarifier, a new one, and then fixing the other two that are there, and the UV disinfection. We have to do the UV disinfection. There's just no way out of that. There's some other have-tos that don't show up in this, and that's the concrete work and throughout the plant. That's some of the electrical work throughout the plant. And that's why when John and I were going through this, we kind of, you know, this bottom line number here was over 7 million. Well, we left out 1.6 million. We left out another 200,000 up here to try and make sure we had that space for the other things that we don't have really good numbers for yet. And then some of these other ones that are orange and green, it becomes a little bit less the priority. It'd be really nice if we can get some of this, because for a very small amount of money, you throw that fourth pump in the headworks. And right now, we've been having problems with the pumps that have been there from the last project, because there's a lot of flushable wipes and other things that come down through the system, and those clog the pumps up. And you know, those pumps have been installed there for 12 years now. You know, we're having to take the pump and send it into the manufacturer, and it's very expensive to do that. If we have two pumps go down at the same time, that's getting critical. So having that fourth pump, although it technically would increase your capacity at the headworks, we're not gonna use that for that increase in headworks capacity. We're gonna use it for reliability when we're having pump issues. And the same thing for that pump that we talked about at the very end of the plant. If we can drop that third pump in, then it ensures that we're not gonna have that problem during high flow times when the river comes up and we've gotta push that water out. And those projects, it's not as expensive dropping that pump in, because the rest of the structure's already there.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Awesome, great.
Is there more, not as question?
I think we kinda.
So I can wait till the end if you've got more.
Oh, I was just gonna circle around and say, you know, did we answer the questions? What are the issues? We got aging parts, we got a little bit of flow restrictions in parts of the treatment train. Why now? It's the proper timing to prevent emergencies. We've got some issues with that clarifier process, you know, the UV we talked about, there's pieces and parts of the plant. We could trim and say, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do this, but when you start taking projects down below certain bondable levels, it doesn't make a lot of sense financially. You're better off usually to bundle things together and then buy yourself a fair amount of time down the road. What happens if we don't? We'll get eventually some failures and some compliance issues, and at some point in time, the state will finally walk in and say, you got to. And then available REUs, we believe we actually can get much more than this 300 to 400, but we're very comfortable saying we can take another 300 to 400 REUs in town.
It's a residential equivalent unit or something?
Yes,
Is that
that'd be
an
like
apartment, or is it
300.
a house, or is it a family, or is that one person?
John, go ahead.
So, that's an excellent question. And so, what that means is, a 30-unit apartment building would take 30 REUs. So it's based on, one for one, and there's an average flow, it's about 200 gallons per day per average family. Trust me, I know way more about this than I ever thought I would at this ripe old age. But I think that's one of the critical things, and, you know, Scott's doing a great job. I was gonna kind of wait till he wrapped up to kind of give my, I guess, comments about where we are and where we go next, so.
Sure.
Well, I'm about there, but, you know, what do you get? You're gonna preserve that important asset. I mean, there's millions of dollars over there at this treatment plant in today's dollars. You have, you know, reasonable growth opportunity without having to go ridiculous here. Because some of the stuff in the Tetra Tech report, we were looking at numbers, you know, 8 million to 12 million, and we really worked at how do we bring this down. And then the future planning, we, you know, with the other work that's been done, we kind of have that roadmap if we need to go that way, but that's an if. The city knows what it would need to do if certain things came in. So I believe that is that.
Thanks, Scott.
The 300 to 400 residential units, does that include what is in the 425 agreements with the township, that's all rolled in there? Or is it those, we don't even talk about it because it's what they've got? Or
We can meet what the city's obligations are with the court case. We can do some reasonable growth in the south where there's vacant land. If we take care of some of these improvements that we're talking about here and continue to work on this I&I, we're feeling that much more comfortable that number can be a lot better, but I don't want to present that to you.
I was just,
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my questions was, well, one, you answered the bundling, so I was asking if we were gonna do this piecemeal or all in one, and so all in one's fine. The second with the I&I, so we're doing a lot of the road projects now. Are you anticipating that we're gonna hopefully find some more of that as we're doing these projects?
I know there's one gonna be taken out right now.
Okay,
There's a storm sewer crossing through a sanitary right now that I think leaks like a sieve.
okay. And so we're hoping that will help increase a little bit.
Every time we find them, we go after them.
Okay, cool.
That's, if I could say anything, with the amount of time I've been sitting in this chamber, we are very good at making sure we have all of our facts and our figures before we move forward on anything, and that's to your credit, Scott. All of the, the Tetra Tech, the camera, going through to figure out what we need to do, and now we're at that point where we can do some of these water mains, sewer mains and everything. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the diligence that you put forward, so I, truly appreciate that. Anybody have any other questions for Scott before John chimes in? So, wow, okay, sorry, John. All right, I'm just gonna go right down the road, Terry, Tom.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I wrote down a couple notes, let me see where I wanted to.
And
The
just,
most
I wanna say one thing too, we're gonna talk more about this at visioning too, correct?
Absolutely.
So let's get our questions out, so that way Scott can say, I can answer it now, or I can wait.
This is
And-
just the next step in the process.
Yeah.
It's hard to ask questions, Scott, because you're the expert on this, so like, we look through this stuff and I don't know anything about clarifiers and pumps and flow, and it's out of my wheelhouse, but, I guess my question is, say we get to a point where we wanna do a $6 to $7 million project, how does that affect the city as far as, what kind of rate hikes are we looking at to have to do something like that?
Sure, go ahead if you wanna answer
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you, Mayor Gilroy. Yeah, no, I don't mind doing that. So that was part of the exercise with Baker Tilly, with the rate study that we did.
Yeah.
And much like, just a little anecdote, the first mayor I ever worked for in Royal Oak, and he always had this mantra of like, show them death and they'll accept pain. Well, the Tetra Tech study was show them a gruesome, awful, wicked death,
Yeah.
and then show them another way to die, okay? I mean, there was no life through that. And so Baker Tilly kind of that was one of the first things when I started here, because I think I know, we sent that Tetra Tech study, which was done in fall of 2022, we sent that out to everybody. And, and I studied it a lot, and I was, fortunate enough to go through a very similar type situation when I came on in Chelsea, that, we had major plant issues, and we were under a consent order. I mean, the city got sued right before I started working there, and we lost, and we had to, there was a moratorium on development, and we had to do wastewater treatment, a new plant essentially, and that was a $12 million project in 2008 or 9. And so that was a net rate increase of 72%.
Wow.
And so Baker Tilly, they showed their options of, there was like the $12 million option,
Right.
and then there was the $6 million option. And so, this project, the conservative estimate for the project presented tonight, and make no mistake, and thank you, Mayor Gilroy, for pointing out that, the city engineer is just like presenting these as facts, like unemotional, and this is what they are, and these are the things that we need to do. I mean, all of us would rather not do any of these things, right? Because there's really no community excitement that comes with, great, I got to flush the toilet today, and the community didn't get a violation letter. It's not really that exciting, right? But the net rate increase based on the Baker Tilly study that was presented, it's about a 35% increase. And again, the curiosity with accountants, among other things, they always present it as, do it right now. I understand that, net present value of money and all the accounting terms, but the practical side for the community, that's not practical. I mean, we can't do a 35, and we won't, and I would never, unless we were under a consent order, which we're gonna avoid, but I would never present that. So it's more, there's the construction tolerance for the community, but there's also the rate shock for the community. So our goal, and Scott, working with Scott on the engineering side of the projects, and then getting the financial side right, is to make that, there's no way to negotiate or horse trade around that. It's gonna be about a $6 million project.
Right.
So the question is, when do we do it, and how many years of a rate increase can the community absorb? And then there's also the overall cost of living here, and are there trade-offs? The other utility budget is water, there's really not a trade-off there, but are there some things like on the general fund side we might be able to do to supplement or augment that rate increase? And really that falls more on myself and the city treasurer to present those options to you. But I'm glad there are all these questions, because those are the right questions to ask, because they're the same questions we ask internally, is like,
Sure.
okay, we know it can't be a $20 million, it can't, you can't do a $20 million project, but what's the project that we can do now that will, ensure that the community, one, maintains the quality of life that we have, and then in the future, not miss out on the opportunity. There's a lot, I know I'm going a little bit down the rabbit hole, but I think it's important for context. There's gonna be a lot of, we have an industrial park that's not full. Industrial users, some of them use a lot of water. There may be a use that we see that comes through. There's gonna be a lot of industrial development in Ingham County with all of the activity with, battery plants and things like that. We don't wanna be in a situation where we miss out on that opportunity because we just simply haven't done, a project, so. But all of these things are, we're at a point that it's most likely gonna be a $6 to $7 million project. The earliest that we would put a shovel in the ground would be probably 2025, I would think. So that gives us a couple of rate years to march towards that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Did that answer your question?
It did.
Did it answer anybody else's question?
One of them.
Okay, all right. Terry, do you have another question?
I just wanted to confirm, so Chelsea was under, this is the not okay thing,
Correct.
Yeah.
and that's what the consequences of the not okay?
Yeah, and then that was, there weren't any discharges in the river, but the not okay was an entirely different, set of, like, really, really not okay. Because there was no development allowed until this plant was
Up and
fixed,
running.
up and running.
So the consequences of not doing this can be pretty serious.
Yeah, not a single
And
housing.
you've lived there, you've done
I have,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Steve?
You mentioned earlier about the state coming in and putting penalty fines and restrictions. Has the state been in, or do they do this type of thing, where they'd come in and sort of do an assessment that you've done and said, yes, makes sense, alternatives to what we're seeing?
We are obligated to do the work, or to hire people to do the work. They will review it and approve and agree with or disagree with the result.
So, but they don't come in and say, we've looked at this and we've got to do all the things that you've already shown here. They don't do that stuff.
They don't do the work, but they will evaluate it, and they have their own professional staff that has the expertise on their side of things to pick apart and evaluate the engineering and the recommendations and make sure that it is feasible.
So they're not gonna come in and do the same report work that Scott has done. They're gonna take the report and they're either, like he said, they're gonna concur, they're gonna debate it, they're gonna make suggestions, or they're gonna say, oh, you were completely off base. John?
And one other thing I want to point out, the water and wastewater, there's a discharge permit that you have, so we have to meet certain criteria, and what's the reporting on that, on the wastewater permitting?
The reporting? I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
the
monthly
reporting.
reports
Yeah,
that we turn in.
monthly
The monthly
reports.
reports have daily information.
Daily information, monthly reports, then you have a permit that says how much you can discharge and what your effluent tolerance limits are, like what, you're treating the stuff and what is it like when it hits the river, so. And those are daily samples.
Funding wise, we're getting a grant for the water. Is there a similar path we can go down for the sewer?
The short answer is, there's always that potential. The challenge that we have, and this is a good challenge, is that we're not an entitlement community, which
We're not
means that,
disadvantaged.
in which we're not a disadvantaged community. So typically, through the state programs, if you are disadvantaged, they'll do principal forgiveness on if you do, it's the state revolving fund, which is a low interest loan program, they'll give you forgiveness on the principal, but we're not an entitlement community, and so that just doesn't happen. And even with there's been the influx of money through ARPA funds and COVID relief and things like that through the state, they're running all of that somewhat TARDIS made through the SRF program. So they just expanded the program, which is great overall for the state, but for us, we can qualify, we'll eventually qualify for SRF, but it'll be in the form of a loan, it won't be in the form of a grant. And we'll keep asking, we will.
That's something we've done very well.
Yeah.
We look for the grants, we'll write for them. Sometimes you get lucky,
Yeah.
We
just
hit the
depends.
lotto with
We
the,
did.
with the.
We really did.
Yeah.
We rolled the dice, didn't we, Dan? For those that were sitting at this table and said, okay, no rate increases, we're gonna go ahead and see if we can get some money. I mean, we did, we rolled the dice and we were very fortunate. Scott, are you done presenting?
Yeah, there's nothing more to
Okay.
present.
Do you wanna grab lights? All right, yes, now, next person.
Yeah, so you got, Tom asked my question about the funding, but, so we're spending $7 million roughly. What do we get in terms of development from that? Is that just keeping things steady? Are we gonna gain 300, 500 housing units? What is the,
More
what is
towards the left.
yeah,
We'll-
we'll gain some?
We'll gain some.
Okay, cause I mean, that's something that
When
I,
we get into the details, I'll be able to be more specific
Yeah.
with you. And remember, the Tetra Tech study work, we only paid $20,000 for this.
yeah,
Normally, if we wanted these kind of answers, we would be in a closer to $100,000 study, and we didn't go there. We
Yeah.
needed to first get through this part to really understand our needs and not waste money and energy in areas that make no sense.
yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, because like, if we're spending $7 million on maintenance, you know, like, that kinda sucks that we're not getting any gains. If we're getting gains, like, that's great for it, because something I've talked to John a lot about is that, like, we need growth here. And unless we're gonna start annexing parts of Williamston Township, then we need to start building south, right?
That's so funny you just said that.
Oh,
We just talked
I talk about that every
Friday.
day. I talk about it every day. But anyways, that's off course. But that's what I was more interested in, is that if we're gonna spend this kind of money, that we can at least say like, hey, town, like, we can build more houses down south, and, you know, we all got that email about the school wanting more people there, so, you know, this is helping towards that end goal.
Yep, John.
So a couple things in the detail of the report, and, you know, there's the engineer's view of RUs, and then there's the administration views of RUs, and sometimes, you know, they meet in the middle for the most part. When, in August, our plant daily flows, because, you know, the river isn't flooding, our plant, the amount running through that plant is about 0.25, it's 250,000 gallons, it's 0.25 MGD, that's the nomenclature used in this wastewater plant. So our plant is permitted for, how many MGDs?
0.65.
Yeah, so wow, you say, look at the delta, right, that's almost, we're only using like, you know, we're using roughly less than 50% of the current capacity. But when we have the wet weather flows, that's when it really spikes up, and there were some of the limiting factors in there about 2.9 MGD, like some of the elements that we need to replace, those are the limiting factors. So you combine that with, you know, the projects that we're likely to do, the I&I, and that's inflow and infiltration, and that's just, it's stormwater into your wastewater system, that's what that means. With the 6 or 7 pretty major projects we have going on over the next couple of years, you know, can we reduce that I&I number down even further? So I think it's, and I don't mind stepping out on a limb and saying this, I think, you know, based on my review and my knowledge of plants, which is not the day-to-day operations that Scott certainly has, but having lived through this before about, you know, we don't have capacity, how do we get it? And then having some engineering folks that I know on the consulting side work with Scott, I think it's a, even a, you know, it's not even a conservative number to say that if pick up another 500 to 700 RUs, if we make these improvements and we chase the I&I a little bit, and there's some other I&I projects like in the golf course, and some areas, so that's reasonable. And I think that, you know, that's a 500 to 750, the likelihood of that number of units being developed on a, you know, 10-year horizon around here is, you know, it's feasible. It's probably not gonna happen, because that's a lot.
Yeah.
But that gives us plenty of comfortable room for growth.
Excellent.
How many RUs do we have right now in our town?
We have,
2,000 customers.
yeah,
Yeah.
just under 2,000 customers.
Just one. So we're looking at about a 10-20% increase here.
The ability to do
Yep.
it.
All right, I'm gonna keep going down the row. Scott, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious if you think that we'll ever reach a point where we have to have a new plant. So at least 10 years. Is that
I think that time frame is long past all of us.
It is, yeah.
So that's not a concern.
Dan?
We're good, I know we really wanted the property next door that we didn't end up, we weren't able to pick up. Are we, all the things we're talking about here, that can all happen on the current property that we have?
Not everything could happen on the current property that we have in the long run.
Gotcha.
In the shorter run, we're okay.
Buy pontoon boats.
We're gonna
Yeah.
build a raft
Right.
system.
Those are
Right.
cheap.
There's certain aspects that we're, you know, if somebody come knocking on the door and said, hey, we wanna come into town and we need to go to another phase or something that we've kind of identified here, we would then be in
Yeah,
a
you know,
situation.
yeah. I don't have any questions because I've been sitting at this table long enough that I've heard a lot of this, I know a lot of this, and I know that you're doing everything you can. And I think you set us up very nicely for, you know, that next phase of our needs. So I'm not going to ask questions, I'll save all mine for the visioning session. So I thank you so much, Scott, for.
The challenge of these presentations is how much do you get into the details
Right.
versus how much do you basically present, here's the end point of what you need to know.
Right. Right. And like I said, this will come back up again at our visioning session for sure. So we'll be able to talk more about it. And if you have any other questions offline, you can always go through John to get those to Scott, and Scott can get those answers for us. And you did put your hand up really quick, Chair.
Is it just sort of a big picture theoretical kind of thing. We were approaching the limits of our capacity, and then the brewery went offline somehow. And so that made our influence went down a whole bunch, because the brewery kind of took care of itself.
Yes, they did.
So
Oh, we forced the brewery, we were
Yeah.
finding them,
Okay,
and
Yeah.
because they were violating our ordinances for what they were giving us.
right.
But we worked with them.
Yeah.
You know, it was important that Old Nation
It was a
here for
good
the
working
community, too.
relationship
Right.
with the brewery. It's not something that they, I don't think, ever anticipated
No.
having that problem. And when that became a problem, then it was a two-way communication. It wasn't us knocking on their door going, what are you going to do? They were right at the table, working partners with us to get a solution, which they did. And they never really once complained about being charged for the extra hauls that we had to make, because they knew it was because of their success of being such a great brewery that it created this problem. So I mean, it ended up being, you know, we got through it. It wasn't easy, we got through it, and they found a solution, and now we don't have that problem.
So John brought up the fact that we have this industrial park, we don't have only a few places are in it. And if we're gonna develop industrial things, then that's gonna have some sort of an impact on the wastewater treatment. And my question would be, is there a way to develop those industrial things and do whatever it was that the brewery did? Can we do a similar kind of thing there? As
So
part of what they're gonna do?
I think that's a deeper conversation to have during visioning, because there's a way bigger answer that, you know, there's a lot of history there that we can share and bring everybody up to speed with
The short
industrial
answer, I can
plan.
give you a short answer, if they meet our discharge limits that are in our ordinances, we don't have a problem.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's
That
what
was
I
the problem, they were multitudes beyond
Yep.
what they were sending us, what they were allowed to send us.
Okay.
I have a 10-second question,
Okay.
20-second answer.
All right, sure.
So-
I like how you just broke that down for me, thank you.
It's a quick one. So we're looking at this process improvement alternative A project, and the couple things that you kind of axed off there, like I think we can skip these, and again, I don't know what I'm talking about when I say influence screening replacement or 4-inch vinyl clarifier expansion. I mean, are those things that you can exclude from this project and see no need for them in the relatively near future?
Yes.
Okay.
That was less than 20 into it, so.
You can ask me offline and I'll give you the full answer.
All right, well, thank you, Scott, I appreciate it. Moving along on our discussion items, road diet. Is there anything to bring us up to speed on the road diet?
Well, let Scott answer.
Yeah, actually, I had a meeting last week with Spicer, and they had presented to me the preliminary plans. Gave some comments, they're fixing those comments right now, so we should be ready in the next couple weeks to send that package to MDOT and get their review comments.
Excellent, fantastic, thank you. Moving along, we did not receive any correspondence, so I will move right along into our department head reports. And so I'll just turn this right over to John. He did provide us with a memo, but I want him to go ahead and expand on it if he feels like he would like to.
Sure, thank you, Mayor Gilroy, members of council. So, we got a lot of meetings coming up, which is great, TIFA, DDA, Planning Commission will meet. probably the next two times, one to look at application for amendment, text amendment for the two-story building that's on the corner over here, that's been in progress for a while. And then also, a month after that, Cold Storage LLC will hopefully have their site plan, special land use ready for the Ice House project, so that's pretty exciting. We had a really good and very well-attended DDA joint meeting with the chamber. We really kind of look at that as the first of many. A lot of good ideas exchanged, and really the idea is to coalesce around, you know, marketing the community as a whole and how we go about doing that and branding and things like that. And that will also be one of the discussions at the visioning session. And I included, and we don't have to go over it tonight, I'm happy to answer any questions folks have, but I just wanted to share the packet of information that we shared with those groups. So I thought that was a really good discussion. Did have a drop-in meeting with Township Supervisor of Williamston, Ms. Bloomquist, and it was very brief, a very good meeting. Topics we've all talked about before, joint master plans. There is a Safe Routes to School grant that's in process. It's pretty exciting, and we talked about some of the regional Red Cedar Trail stuff. So this is a nice drop-in meeting, always good to catch up and maintain good dialogue with our neighbor community. The Trail Town stuff I included, it's a good vision. John Molman is really he's a bad pun, the force of nature when it comes to kayaking in the Red Cedar River. He's a real great community partner. So, you know, in that document it says the city's committed to doing some things, and really it's just we're in the investigation stage for a lot of those items. But stay tuned for that. There's a lot of cool things on the horizon. So that's all I have.
Great.
Yeah, it's gonna be a busy spring, summer, and fall, and winter again, but that's just how we like it around here, so thanks.
Does anybody have any questions for John regarding his manager's report? I can tell you, I did invite John Woolman to come and speak to us. He's got some fantastic ideas for the river, for paddle groups, and expanding the trails and tying everything together for our walkable trails, our community parks, the river, tying us to the communities outside of Williamston. He has a vision. I want you all to hear it. I think it's great. But again, that'll be for another time. We will be having a very busy year this year. So roll up your sleeves and get ready. We have our treasurer's report in here. So if you do have any questions regarding our finances, please don't hesitate to reach out to John. He can converse with Tom and get those answers for you. We do have our Livingston County Building Department. If you have any questions regarding any of the permits that have been issued or the work that is going on, and if we're still seeing consistent work, residential and commercial, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out to John. He'll be able to get those answered for you. I know it's the very beginning of the year, but I will ask quickly, does anyone want to share anything from their committee or subcommittees that they've sat on?
We had a NISA meeting last week, and most of the conversation focused between interactions with NISA and Weberville, but one thing I did want to mention was that NISA's Deputy Chief Rod Feaster is officially retired, so they'll be replacing Rod as Deputy Chief, but which is a big loss for NISA, because Rod was an awesome leader for a long time. I worked with him for a long time, and he was a great asset to that department, so I'm happy that for him that he's retiring, but bummed for NISA, so.
Yeah, good for him.
Did they name who the deputy chief is going to be after Rod?
So that question was brought up, and I believe that's gonna be up for some further discussion. There is a candidate within NISA, who's in charge of their training policy, that is interested and willing. So we'll see how that transpires.
Great question. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, I went to the cemetery board meeting, it's business as usual, as you
Alright.
can imagine. There's something new though, they're putting in Foot Cemetery. Summit Cemetery is gonna add a green, they call it green burial section, it's a different way of looking at it.
Okay.
And I'd never heard of it before, but it's a different approach to burials. And in 30 years there, you can reuse the sites in 30 years because there's no casket or anything, it's just a person in there, so it's something new to me and that's what they're doing. They're also looking at the fees, 15,000 a year is what they pay now. It hasn't been adjusted since 2012, I think they told me. and they may be looking at that. Well, they are looking at that, but whether they're gonna ask for an increase, I don't know at this point. But yeah, it was good to be back there. Mac Donnelly's still there, that guy's cool.
All right,
Yeah,
excellent.
we'll be back.
Well, you've had busy couple meetings then since
Yeah.
you came back. Thank you, Scott. Anyone else have a meeting yet so far? All right, well, by the end of our, next month, I'm sure you will all have information to share. Right now, we'll go ahead and see if there's anybody in our audience, maximum 5 minutes presentation. I have a feeling you're from MSU.
Yeah.
All right, journalism students, yay. I love our journalism students, thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind, could you each introduce yourself, what year you're at in MSU, and that'd be great.
I'm a junior at MSU, obviously studying journalism, and we're here to profile Williamston, obviously, and just get a feel of the city. I'm very entertained. This is awesome conversations. Some of it I don't understand, but I'm happy to learn. So yeah.
And your name?
Sarah.
Sarah?
My name's Nathan, and I'm also a junior at Michigan State.
All right.
I'm Alec, and I'm also a junior as well.
All right, great. Well, what I will tell you is our meetings are listed on our website. I highly encourage you, not just city council, our DDA, our planning. Those are all great meetings to attend because it will tell you what's going on in our city. Please don't hesitate. If you've got special interests that you want more information on, certainly reach out, and we'd be more than happy to answer questions to help you get through this semester.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, council member comments. I'll go ahead and start down on this end this time with Dan.
No comment.
All right,
Just
Scott.
a quick comment on the success of the farmers market. They created a master plan for the next 5 years. So Sharon LaPointe, you know Sharon
Yes,
LaPointe?
yes, absolutely.
Well, she's the champion, but she's turned over the reins to getting rid of them now. But, yeah, it's a very good group, and the market's it's cool now, and it's gonna be getting cooler through the year. So, pleasure to see that happening.
Awesome, thank you, Scott. All right, Brandon.
Thanks, Scott, for all the work on the presentation. It's a painful process for a lot of us, and so you're making it a lot easier answering our questions. Thanks for that. And then welcome back, Chief Young. We're happy to have you back.
Thank you.
Steve?
Well, Brandon took my comments. So.
It's always okay to recycle. All right, Terry?
I just want to say publicly, should anybody watch the video, that we've been able to do this twice now without Noah. I don't know how we managed to do
I know,
that.
right? Yep.
So, I think we did.
You might end up being the new Noah, Terry. Tom?
Welcome back, Chief.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, we're just now to, our second meeting of the year. As I just mentioned earlier, roll up your sleeves. This will be a busy year for us. I anticipate the next couple years are going to be very full of hard work. Our community is going to benefit from it. Could not do it without all of us sitting here at this table to be able to support up to our city manager, John, to our DPW director, Scott. Holly keeps us, tight and in line with everything, so I appreciate everything that our city clerk does as well. Tim, we couldn't do it without you. Chief, I can't wait for you to sit over there and say nothing to report. I kind of expect that. So I'm so happy that you're back and that you're gonna, fill that role for us. We have a lot of good things that are gonna happen in this community this year. I'm excited about the visioning session. And as my last final comment, there is no parking out in the streets from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. in anticipation this Wednesday of a potential, I'm sorry, Scott, I have to say it, 3 to 5 inches. There is a storm warning, I think, on the horizon. Please get out and shovel your sidewalks within 24 hours after that snowfall. That helps our residents out greatly for our residents that do walk. Please help our DPW by, keeping our streets clear during that time frame. I think our community did fantastic when we had to issue the no parking from 7 to 7. That when we were anticipating a lot bigger snowstorm that luckily didn't really come through. But I just appreciate the way that our community works together, our residents, our businesses, our city staff. We couldn't do it without everybody. So With that, I will go ahead and we will adjourn at 8:18.